Okay, awesome. We are live from what I can see. So, hi everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations. And today we're going to be having an interesting conversation with a very good friend of mine, Daniel. We're going to be exploring the nature of astrology from an esoteric perspective, understanding the deeper language that is coded into this mystical experience. And yeah, just a background on what has actually led to this conversation between us today. You've been sharing with me some really deep revelations and understandings of stuff, and for me, I'm personally excited to hear this because, as I was mentioning to you before we started this, there was a part of my own personal reality that was exploring it at some point in time. So I feel a kind of opportunity to come back to something that I was exploring, and really have some inspiration again. So yeah. Would you like to start us off, or just begin sharing what you want to talk about, and let's see what happens in this time that we spend together.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing your space with me, Simon, and holding space because this is a very exciting subject matter. I mean, astrology has been one of my favourite and exact topics to cover for such a while.
Yeah.
And so this is really the depth of astrology beyond the reach that that I had conceived that it reached to.
Yeah.
You can tell my excitement because my stammering. And so basically, I'll start at the beginning with regards to how I was reaching this new territory with regards to astrology.
Yeah.
And that was actually on the summer solstice, which is a perfect place for me because Cancer, which is the sign which the sun would have just ingressed to on the day of the summer solstice, is actually my midheaven and it's opposed my sun. So my sun's just after the winter solstice in the beginning of Capricorn.
Yeah.
And so at this time, I had a kind of a personal realization just about the solar year in itself.
Yeah.
And so we start out each birthday, each solar return, and we have a solar return chart in astrology.
Right.
And for myself, the last solar return wasn't the brightest, wasn't the most celebratory, wasn't the most exciting. It was quite a lonely and dense experience because Saturn had just ingressed into Capricorn at that time.
Okay.
And so I was dealing with basically what had just been the end of my Saturn return because my natal Saturn is in Sagittarius.
Right.
And so I felt the confinement and the restriction of Saturn on top of my sun and my creativity, which is in my fourth house.
Right.
So I felt like I was stuck in a house with very supported by my mother, and who is a Capricorn sun, so Capricorn moon, pardon me. And so I also was feeling quite lonely and quite restricted with regards to many different things, especially socially and all of this kind of thing.
Right.
6 months later, the sun is opposing my sun, and I'm discovering that I've learned a tremendous amount of patience, which is what I thought I didn't have.
Okay.
And so I was commending myself on this growth of 6 months, and I
Right.
could see that actually having a realization that the sun, being as far away as it can be from your own natal sun in the chart, is basically the extension of our spirit, the extension of our creativity, the growth of that particular annual cycle of the growth of our heart, of the awareness of what we can contribute through this cycle. We can't really expand it any further because it can't travel further away before returning.
That's right. Exactly.
It's a bit like a full moon experience, but looking at through the eyes of the sun, through
Hmm.
the eyes of the solar deity. And so I was seeing that through new eyes, and I was just like, wow, that's pretty cool. I appreciate that. It's a bit of a relief that I can see that I've learned patience and that I've had this trellis, for want of a visual analogy,
Yeah.
like a trellis to grow myself up upon, Saturn being that trellis.
Yeah.
Even though it's cleared off, moved up to 10 or 11 degrees, and then retrograded back to where it is actually currently on my sun today, again, as we have this conversation.
Right.
So,
And so the awareness of that Saturn kind of going back to the sun again for you has brought this illumination of patience and growth, and whereas when it went over before, it was more around the old conditioning that was associated with it, right? Because it went through a retrograde period.
yes. And so I was like, I obviously wasn't seeing myself as a patient being. I was seeing myself as somebody who wanted to break out, be free. I always associate with the Uranian archetype of rebelliousness and, you know, wanting a quick solution now. Whereas actually now, over the past year, I've really grown into being a Capricorn.
Right. And so I noticed with yourself when I first started looking at your work, and I even remember making a comment on one of your Facebook posts about, if I remember correctly, you have Uranus, natal Uranus in your third house, right?
I do indeed.
Exactly. And when Jeffrey Wolf Green talked about Uranus in the third house, he would specifically say that these souls would struggle a lot with trying to make a connection to their most immediate environment, because the structure of their mind is so future orientated and accelerated that the definitions that are held within the environment are outdated to them. So they're like trying to pull people along saying, hey, by the way, can you see this? Can you see this? Can you see this? And it's like, no, we can't. No, we can't. And so there can be an isolation, a feeling of like, nobody understands me. And I wanted to make a comment about how this message, this information that you're wanting to share in these revelations, is a beautiful way to see a Uranus third house energy, because it is literally like going, hey guys, wake up, we can see deeper, we can see deeper, we can see deeper, right? But now you're doing with that Capricorn patience of, okay, how do I structure it so that I don't alienate people from these concepts, because they themselves are trying to be accelerated, but they don't have that energy. Like building a bridge, right?
That is the definition of my experience through the entirety of maybe the past decade. Yeah.
Right.
Except for that last bit of the Capricorn edition has been just the past 9 months.
Right.
Because it's been a very much like, hey, come on, there's some really useful information here, which is incredibly shocking and exciting. And it's firstly my disillusionment to why other people didn't jump on and be like, wow, that's great. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be that other people wouldn't see the value within the information. That was very awakening initially. Like when back in 2008, 2009, when I was having my first original awakenings into these kinds of subject matter before my discovery of how poignant and potent astrology was going to be for me in my experience.
Yep.
It was just like smaller awakenings. But anyway, well, going back to the present time that we've been dealing with, and to the summer solstice. It was actually I was meeting a client for lunch. Beautiful sunny day as it would be at the solstice, and this client was actually a client of my mother's, who's a psychotherapist and teaches that at university. So I don't know any of her degrees or initials, but she's done well and she studied good. And so it was interesting because my mother doesn't do astrology, and so this client of hers wanted to have an astrology reading. She was into the more occult, mystical arts, and we had a very interesting connection. Like her sun was on my descendant. We didn't know this at the prior time arrangement. Her moon ended up being on my ascendant, so and her Neptune was on my Venus. So we got on great, and we had a great conversation. And at some point, we decided that we would love to go and organize a trip to the Amazon and do some ayahuasca medicine at some point, maybe in 2019.
Right.
We didn't know that this was actually something that we were going to go into pursuing or go into cohorts. But this lady, she's actually become a good friend, and we meet every couple of weeks and talk about astrology now, and it's really useful. She held space for me and said, you're going to have an awakening. You're going to wake up to this some information on a deeper level. And I was like, shh, I don't think so. I don't see that happening. I don't know why I didn't have faith or anything like that. I mean, it wasn't a lack of faith. I just thought, I just don't see that. I haven't had a broad awakening. It's like a sudden ton of bricks fall down upon me since like 2015. And that was a very shocking experience. And when we have these experiences, there seems to be really nobody there, and you try and reach out, and there's that for a reason. There's no one there. This is something which, because we're vibrating so high at these times, we can't. It's just for us to transmute and deal with ourselves.
Correct.
And we could be seen as crazy if anybody was here, because we're not really. It's all new, and it's all unfiltered. And so, funny thing is, the reason I started the story there was because of those premonitions that were projected at me, and because of the time of year. So 3 months later, we come to the autumn equinox, full solstice, if you will, equinox. And so, again, this is another cardinal energy. This
Yeah.
is Libra energy rather than the Cancer energy. And the sun's ingress was what brought around these realizations and concepts for me, which is perfectly poignant because I'm a Libra ascendant, first of all. And so the sun's ingress into my first house of the whole sign nature was bringing this illumination with regards to the solar spirit of the sun.
Yep.
And it was the 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night coming into balance that initially brought these concepts to light. So I'm looking across at my descending sign at Aries, and I'm remembering that's the spring. And that again is equal 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. They say that the sun is born in Aries in the natural zodiac. This is the lamb. And so also we look at the other significations with regards to Aries, and we see that it's the singularity. It's the man, Adam. It's like if we look at Aries and the letter A, it's the letter A is in the shape of a man. Like if you look at the Da Vinci painting, he's actually got the man inside the square, inside the circle, and he's there, and it's like a Fibonacci, very Venetian, very beautifully scaled portrayal of the human flesh suit, or the light being.
Light being.
The bringer of light, if you will, like, because we're bringing awareness to ourselves in this experience. And to do that, we must manifest into this physical. And so we could say that the sun, the star of the sun, which we really celebrate, is the hero of our story in astrology, because it's the one that that all of the other luminaries dance around, whether it's the moon or Venus or Mars, or Mercury. So it's a bit in front or a bit behind these guys, these collaborators. And so the sun in Aries is all about the singularity. It's about the individual. That's what Aries is about. It's about me, myself, and I.
Yep.
And so the singularity is the individual and how we identify with things, and that's the Aries quality. And when we look over to Venus, we look over to Libra, it's all about becoming into balance. When we observe that other beings are doing what we're doing, or they're doing what something that we're not doing, they're doing what they're doing, and it's about being able to gain a better perspective of through reflection of other people, to see that actually we're not just a singularity, we are a we are a whole humanity. Beings. We come into relation with others through observation.
That's right.
And so it's about the balance. We come into balance when we see that actually it's not just about myself, it's about those other people and how we can relate to them. And so I was seeing that the glyph of Libra is this sunset, or the sun leaving our local space.
Yes.
And it was the pennies dropping over the course of 3 weekends in a row that allowed me to really notice the poignancy of that. But first of all, I made the signification and comparison to how that sun is represented by a circle with a dot in it, and we are the dot in the middle of the circle, and every circle is a cycle, just like the cycle that the sun's going around every year, or even every day. And so this circle is a letter that we're all familiar with. The circle is an O. And so we look at, although Libra begins with an L, funnily, the O is a vowel, just like the A. Aries, which is the star, and O, which is a circle which goes round. And O is an infinite circle. It's actually the sign of Libra is the same sign that is represented by the sound of omega. So there's the alpha, the individual, the singularity, and the omega. It's because when we connect, when we come into balance with other people, we see that there's infinity.
Correct.
And the sun, which is setting or leaving our space, will return. It's on an infinite loop. It's the first and the last. It will always be resurrecting the sun. And so that's a celebration that we see through the dance of the seasons, through
Correct.
astrology. It's the consistent loop, year in, year out, day in, day out, of the sun returning on this loop. And omega is in the Greek alphabet, is the pronunciation of the vowel of consistency, the O, the
Yeah.
O. Whereas all of the vowels are infinite, except for
Mm.
A, which is got the punctuated alpha.
Beginning. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's that singular, individual, independence, Aries, and the I would like to be with you forever. Oh, Libra. Or I'd like to look at you forever, Libra.
Yeah.
I'd say be with you forever is more Scorpio.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And this is a real special thing. Before I get into the numbers, that I noticed this the third week, because it was funny because it was the whole time that the sun's been in Libra, I've been reawakening to the poignancy of the sun, and so really I see that Libra is about observation
Yes.
and reflection,
Mm.
and the beauty in observation, because Libra is ruled by Venus, right? And so we're looking at this sun in the sky as it's going from our space, our local space, and it's so beautiful, it's so alluring to, like, if someone beautiful is within our vicinity, or whether it's a temptation of looking at a beautiful meal being prepared. All of these things can be observed and appreciated from before we get involved. But I see that as soon as you have a conversation or eye contact, then you become entangled and you're in the Scorpio zone.
Yes. You're osmosed with it.
That's the temptation, because Venus is being receptive and observing the beauty, and as soon as you go into Scorpio, you've penetrated into a Mars zone, or
Yeah.
you've come into a taboo Plutonian zone. And so it's a completely different energy, and you're entangled, even if it was the most subtle hello or something like that. The veil has been pierced at that point. Just like as the sun disappears, it just, once it's gone, it's gone. But
Yeah.
when it's still there, you're observing it, and it turns beet red, and it just melts everywhere if it's a nice day, and you can see that pink, orange beautifulness. But when it's
Yeah.
gone, it's gone, and it's a memory. And then, funnily enough, in the natural zodiac, I'm seeing that if you're making the comparison to the sun being gone, it's not suddenly Scorpio. Our relationship to the sun is a Virgonian one.
Yeah.
Because we've been observing this sun disappear for so long that our vision is so acute and refined by this point that we know what we have. And what we have is great vision, and the ability to be discerning with what we have. But we have an infinite abundance of the spirit within, the raw material of our spirit within.
Right.
So I'm seeing that the way that we actually experience the sun from a practical natal chart level, when we were born. So wherever the sun was, at what time of day we were born, is how we can compare it to where the sun was. And I, as being a Libra, my position, my ascendant, is comparison to when the sun was setting, because I'm a Libra rising.
Right.
And so I was actually born at 1 a.m. The sun couldn't be further away from me, in a sense.
Yes. Yes.
So actually, depending on the house system used, my sun would fall either into the 4th house or the 3rd house.
Yeah.
And so either one of these work from a psychological point of view. So the 4th house for me, I'm saying that's like a Capricorn archetype or a Cancerian archetype, because both will work, for example, a Libra rising.
Yep.
So I'm making the comparison of saying that actually we're seeing that it's an emotional connection, how the spirit of the sun and the warmth of the sun, the heart of the sun, is nurturance, like an incubator. And so, but it's also the connection to the spirit of the sun, being that Capricorn is in my 4th house.
Right.
That my connection of the spirit is nurturing me to aspire towards any goals and aspirations that I have and achieving. So it's about the 10th house. But anyway, that's about really how I'm seeing another way of relating to the time of day and where the sun was situated in comparison to where we are, what space and location we find ourselves to be in comparison to the sun. which I see as true astrology. I'm not saying that any other
No.
means of, it's just a real lens of astrology that we can relate to in a very organic way.
Yeah. Because that's the point of astrology, is that well, there's many points to it, but when you really get into understanding astrology at this level, we are using our observation to follow celestial movements and make correlations to how that is influencing our perception of reality. And each of us are born at a unique time that allows us to make a correlation between that moment in time, the body, and how that moment in time is a template for the ongoing, like, sort of evolution of those planets, because they're going to continue to keep moving. So for both me and you, being human beings and being sort of structured in a way where we're self-reflective, right? This is the capacity of the human being, is self-reflective at the moment. There is a observation correlation dynamic that's taking place, and astrology is simply just the mathematical way in which we can, through a mental logical process, digest that. And the irony of the situation is that we're actually moving away from that in a very, like, weird way. As a human race, like, we're moving, or let me put it this way, the evolution of the new human is not about that anymore. It's not about looking at things through this cognitive lens of 1 + 1 = 2. It doesn't mean that astrology is invalid or it's not real, because that's not the case. In fact, it's giving us the very organic way to relate to it. And that's the structure and origin of it. But what we're bringing in now is this component of, what does that mean for you at an abstract inner verse level? How does that observation of that celestial movement like pull you straight into the center, so that when you're taking your eyes of duality and forming the center over here, and you're looking inward, what is that celestial movement reflecting to you? And that's the thing that is being added to astrology. So we have this opportunity to measure it the way that you're sharing it right now, and that's what its true essence is completely. I love it. And then the added, like, component is our ability to now take that and see our own universe expanding, right? And that's what people are interested in now. They're like, oh, okay, cool, this is so much fun. Like, I'm noticing, like, I have this emotional complex, and it's like, oh, well, that looks like that Venus is transiting over your moon at this stage, right? That timing for your DNA is being awoken, and that then allows us to access that path that the sun is looping around consistently all the time, saying, hey, I'm going to reveal to you. That's what the light is in the body. The body is holding space for the light to go around consistently all the time, until eventually you're so illuminated around that karma that you can resolve it.
Definitely. Right? It's almost like knowing our own cosmology.
Exactly.
If we're all mini universes, if we are the individuality, if we are the singularity and the whole, then as a singularity, in a micro version, we're dragging around that whole with us wherever we go. Dragging, or are we actually causing waves with it? This is our own, our own vessel, and a vessel is like something which navigates its way through the current now.
Yeah.
And so wherever we go, we're creating waves with our influence within this ocean, if you will, of consciousness.
Correct.
So it's very magnificent. I just wanted to direct awareness to Dice Man in the chat. He asked a specific question with regards to what if your sun's in the 12th house in Virgo? Well, I'm seeing that if the 12th house in Virgo, if that's where your sun is, then just when you're preparing to be born, the sun hadn't quite risen, but it had by the time you were born. So in a sense, you were in darkness. The world was in darkness when you were preparing to be born, when you were coming through, if you were, the contractions of your mother was having contractions. And so that's the Piscean energy, that's the 12th house. And so your familiarity with darkness, and knowing that the spirit of the sun is to be celebrated, is so acute and refined. It's like you've got the polarity of Virgo and Pisces all mixed into one. So you've got the awareness of your spiritual nature in a sense of a very guru, a very present and compassionate way. You're compassionate because the rising of the sun is so close. That the sun is going to come out and it's going to be a brand new day. However, you're also familiar with that actually you can go within your own heart and find your sun at any time. So you've got the perfect combination. That's very Libra kind of thing, because it's the balancing act of both, you see, in your Libra rising.
That's super cool. I appreciate your desire to want to respond to Dustman over there. And if anybody's got some questions for Daniel, Philip, Daniel, I'm reading your middle name, then feel free to ask. I'm sure you'd be happy to apply your wisdom that you've been having downloads through in a practical way. And if it helps people process their reality, feel free to respond to any questions. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. It's exciting because it's testing to me as well, because it's seeing it from a different perspective. Because it's like we learn to do things through criteria from elders, from books, and that's very practical and very useful because there's a way of doing things and there's a way of learning. However, once you have experiential knowledge to add on top of that, then we're broadening our own practice, and so it is a practice. And so you have to practice it and practice it and practice it. And so this is the only something which has fallen into seeing it from this perspective over the past few weeks. So it's great to broaden my knowledge practicing with you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Get back to the numbers, of which is really crazy. So this is where I was starting to be like elated with excitement, because it was very much like a spiritual awakening in a sense, because I was very aware of the spiritual nature of myself and of everybody, and that astrology offers depths to that. However, I've been reading this geometry book, and I had it for 6 to 9 months, and I kind of didn't read it for the first 4 or 5 months, but we always start reading things at the right time. So I just about read enough by the time this autumn equinox had come around, because they're talking about magic squares, which is like a magic square can be when you've got as many numbers going up, say 3, and say the magic square of 9 would be 3. It's basically a cube 3 by 3, a square 3 by 3, and all of the numbers add up to 9 within that. So when you do that with 12, because the 12 up and 12 down, then you get the number 144. And so the Libra equinox and the spring equinox is 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. And so as that was going on, I did a ritual or something like this, and I didn't really plan on anything, to be honest. And I was aware that also, due to an article which I had been paid to write it as well over the course of the past few months, with regards to sun sign and moon sign compatibility. And there are 144 combinations of the sun and moon, because that's 12 times 12. And so I had that number. I know it's a biblical number. It comes up in the Bible a lot. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of the stories that it was particularly used for in the Bible. I'm not that refined with my biblical stories. However, I Google the poignancy, what's the meaning of 144, and it's a number that comes up in a few different parables, I believe, and a few different allegories, because it's an important number, right? It's so looking at this information rolling in, and I was like, okay, 144, and if you get a circle, which I was become aware as well through the same geometry book, every circle has a diameter of 666, and that's just the line across a circle. Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's the same for every circle and every cycle. If we're talking about cycles, that's what astrology is all about. So every lunar cycle is just the moon going round the sky and creating a cycle. And so it's the moon is like a womb. It's what anything that you create within a lunar cycle is a new conception, whether it's a business plan, a piece of art, a baby. You create a baby, for sure. That's the gestation cycle of the moon 28-day transit.
Absolutely.
And so you can either have a new conception within a cycle, or and it's punctuated by a period, a full stop. So if you don't conceive of something, then it bleeds out, which is quite direct language, because we're talking about the gestation cycle of a female here as well. That's the moon, it's a feminine quality. And so Um, this is where it gets very convoluted. So I don't want to lose anybody or lose myself.
Yeah.
But however, um, we'll come back to many of these things. And the what is a full stop? Well, it's just a point.
Mm-hmm.
It's a point. It's how you make your point punctuated. And you can say it's the point of our star, if we're all stars, which we'll come back to many times, because we're talking about the sun, which is our star.
Yeah.
And our star rises for the first time in spring. It's reborn in the spring, our star,
Mm-hmm.
into 12 hours of equilibrium as the individual singularity. And so we see that it's a point of awareness.
That's
So
right. A
that's
point
why,
of awareness.
yes. And so stars have 5 points, but that if we look Google, what's a star? There's actually a geographical shape of a star, and it's a 5-pointed star generally, which is the most average blueprint, and that's also the one that Venus makes in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to stay concentrated right now because there's so many pieces of information.
This is
And
coming through.
yes, so the funny thing is that we can create anything within that 28 days with the moon with regards to a new project.
Mm-hmm.
It depends which area of life that it's falling in for you in your natal charts. And however, we see the similarity that the moon is the planet in the sky, which is our nearest entity in a sense.
Right.
And
To Earth.
Saturn is the furthest away. So this is our emotional boundaries, our emotional well-being, how we nurture ourselves, how we feel safe and at home, the moon. And Saturn is how we feel safe in the world. It's
Correct.
our bigger boundaries. It's the things that protect us as a humanity, like the education system, or the health system, or it may even be our home that we've built, or our reputation that we've built, or our own personal boundaries that we assert, because it's almost like the mother, moon, or the father, Saturn, in the sky. That's the way I see it. And so it's the protection, it's our boundaries, it's our skin, Saturn. It's our bone structure, it's our backbone.
Exactly.
And so it's the authority that we put out, and the authority that we give other structures that support us. And these things take a lot longer to build. Not like a month, 28 days, but 28 years. It takes Saturn 28 years to go around the whole sky. So we see the similarity there, the comparison of the moon and Saturn. And so Saturn also makes a circle, like all of the characters in the sky. And so Saturn's a womb of itself, a 28-year womb, a 28-year cycle.
Right.
And so
there's something really interesting to observe about the nature of 28 days and 28 years in the Saturn return and the moon. And I think that's a really, like, to actually amplify that, like, look at how Saturn and the moon, how you reference them as the most immediate emotional sense of security, and then Saturn reflecting this outer boundary that we are within. And, you know, in like EA, for instance, the way that you would interpret the Saturn-Moon relationship can actually give you a very strong indication of how somebody's sense of identity can actually integrate themselves into a society. And if you have Saturn oppose the moon in a chart, you can see that clearly this person's going to struggle with feeling like they can integrate themselves into society because of the perceived opposition between the moon and the sun. And that's just one layer of reading that. And then there's the other layer that you're bringing attention to, which is more along the lines of, look at how these planetary systems are set up in a way that is not a coincidence. Look at how they're all working in symphony. And the structure of our lives and our reality is coded within this matrix, right? Not a coincidence. Saturn 28 years, moon 28 days, right?
Yeah, well, the relationship is, the funny thing is there's such a distance from each other, you could say, but they're so tight with regards to their connection, because they're actually in 360 lunar cycles within 28 years. And so there's 360 degrees in a circle, or in every circle. So that's a very big piece of information. And we see that with our secondary progression charts. It's very poignant. piece of tool for using for psychotherapy and for seeing what's happened within our journey, and if we can correlate, okay, well, this is a big relationship for me, or this was a big career moment for me, or this was a big time. You can see it all in the secondary progression chart with regards to where the moon was progressed, and I've learned that correlates greatly with our Saturn return.
Yeah.
So it's very poignant and purposeful. So going back to these numbers, so I feel like, yeah, so actually, while we're on that we're still finished with the numbers. So there's the 144. We put that on a shelf. We're doing some maths. Don't forget about that 144. And we've got the 666 of the diameter of a circle. And they say that's the number of the beast, if you will. But actually, we're talking about a womb. Every cycle is a womb. And it's a womb for our consciousness. I like to say that actually we are within, we've seen now that we're within a cycle of Saturn, which is 28 years. So every month is a womb for us to grow, but every 28 years is a womb that we can grow within as well. So we could say we're within the womb of the moon, or we're within the womb of the sun over the course of 360 years. 360 days, 365 days. But within 28 years, we're also within the womb of Saturn.
Right.
And so this is, you can see, if we look into the astrology of great business archetypes, we can see the rise of the consistency of how you build a business over the course of 30 years, 28 years. And if a business has been around for 60 years, then you see that it builds a solid foundation that gets it a great reputation, and then it becomes like an entity of its own.
Yes.
Over the course of the next 30 years, as it's been there around for 60 years, you see that it's got a legacy and it's like a predominance with regards to its effect and influence, because it's it's got a whole being of its own. The people who have actually built the business can probably go retire, put their feet up, and leave the other people working and taking care of it. And so that's what happens in a womb. You grow something like a baby or an entity that's got its own being, its own structure, its own form, its own flesh suit. So we could say that our projects that we build over the course of 30 years, like a business, is its own entity. It's got its own organic system, its own networks within it. So what is the 666? Well, but they say this is the circle. Many Illuminati kind of figures, if we look into that kind of thing, they do this. But we can see, I don't know if it's coming out on camera, but this looks like 666, and it's got a circle. So the maths and geometry of 666 is this. I didn't realize that until I was literally posing to say this is a circle and saw it, and like, oh my gosh, that's what that is.
So have you looked at the Google sign? Have you looked at Google Chrome?
Sign. Oh, right.
The Google Chrome?
No, I haven't.
Look at Google Chrome. It's 666 lying on top of each other, side by side. It makes the actual Chrome.
Wow. That is phenomenal. I saw somebody was talking about that, but in the chat, I couldn't really focus because we were talking.
Yeah.
But that's amazing. I'm just having a little look. So, yeah, these things are hidden in plain sight everywhere. And it's rather beautiful because if we do the maths of 144 plus 666, then that equals 810. 810 is 8 plus 1, it equals 9. And so I'm looking at Google now.
So if you have a look, there's a blue dot in the middle. That's the place, that's the base for the circle of 6. And then if you look, you've got the yellow, the red, and the green. And if you see 6 in the red, 6 in the yellow, 6 in the, you'll see it. They're all just curled up together.
Wow. I'm going to have to do a good stare at these later.
I've got a whole entire package for you that you can go have a look at. MasterCard and the Vesica Pisces, Coca-Cola, Mercedes-Benz.
Some of them are like Volkswagen. Oh, that's a brilliant one, Volkswagen. Because we're about to get deep into the Vortex maps, which is really, really where a lot of this information comes together in a very, very beautiful way. So 144 plus 666, these two very biblical numbers, where it's the number of the beast, which 666 has been brandished as, which means, what is it? Okay, well, the number of the beast, some people say it's Saturn, some people say it's Satan, and some people say it's us. We're the beast. Well, I think that's much more likely. Yes, we are the beast. We are the conscious awareness within a flesh suit, which has been it's our beastly nature that we can wrestle with, consciously wrestling with. Are we going to go for that cake, or are we going to go to do yoga? Well, that's a wrestling match that only we can decide. Sometimes we're going to choose the cake, which is just as good as just choosing the yoga, because
That's
we're here
right.
to experience, we're in the physical world. And there's no wrong or right, it's down to our own jurisdiction.
I do want to add something really, really important to what you're sharing over there. And in fact, you were talking about it earlier about how it can be easily misleading to get caught up in the stigma of things like Lucifer and Christ and biblical. You mentioned how the body and the moon was the womb. And what was the whole entire point of patriarchy? What was the whole entire point of patriarchy? It was rooted in a complete and utter denial of the feminine. So the beast is really patriarchy's influence within the denial of the feminine in the womb,
This is the
right?
real big point. This is the ultimate point of the whole story, really.
Right.
Because the Capricorn archetype is a feminine archetype, and yet it's depicted as a masculine beast,
Correct.
which is just sacrilege. Because we've all got Capricorn within us, and it's the feminine archetype which we've been having to be pushed down and pretend it's this big, strong boss, this big, strong, ghoulish energy, this big, strong, unflexible energy, and which is where it has been experienced. Like the boss doesn't seem to be flexible. We're like, oh, it's intimidating. I don't know if I can tell the boss that I have emotions. Emotions
Correct.
are no place in the workplace. They come last. And fate, this is where we see that actually this is a polarity which has been the most out of balance within the whole zodiac. The Cancer versus the Capricorn archetype, the Moon and Saturn, out of balance but perfectly in union when you look at the maths. When we look into the depth of astrology, they are the most, well, some of them, the whole zodiac is tight. But like that is a polarity which we're looking at healing moving into the next 18 months for sure, as the nodes are regressing back into those signs very shortly. So it's very cool because we're going to see a big change in these archetypes. This is where the eclipses are happening. It's very exciting.
So you were talking about numbers and stuff.
Yes, numbers. So we got down to that maths of 666 plus 144. You get 810. And 810, 8 plus 1 is 9. 9 is the ultimate number, in the sense that in vortex maths, which is something which I heard about, pushed to the back, I was like, I like a bit of maths, and I see that this is pretty cool, but I don't know where it's leading. It's just like, you kind of pick up things along the way when we're on our journey of the way things, and we see things, and there can be clues or pieces to the puzzle that maybe we're not quite ready or understanding in its fullest at that point. So we're like, okay, well, that's good, it's beautiful, not for me. Let's stick with the astrology that I can see and use. So that's what I was about at that point. And so I saw that this vortex math is pretty cool. Basically, there's this way, a pattern which you can do any sum on. And whether it's a division, a multiplication, or a subtraction, or a multiply. You can do all of these different sums on this template, where it had a circle, and 9 was at the top of the circle, and you'd follow it around clockwise, around this magic circle of basically, and it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9 be back at the top. And so basically you could do any maths on this. There'll be 1 plus 1 equals 2, 2 plus 2 equals 4, 4 plus 4 equals 8, and then you've basically made yourself aware of the whole of the circle, and 8 plus 8 equals 16. So you have the 1 and the 6, you've got 7, and you end up making your way back down the circle. 7 plus 7 is 14. So then you add 1 plus 4, then you've got 5. And then 5 plus 5 equals 10. Well, you drop the 0, you got 1, and you go back up to the 1.
Yeah.
So this is the bouncing of maths. It's like a pattern that goes round and round in this circle. And it doesn't include the number 9, 3, or 6. They make a triangle within the pattern, and it's untouched. And so with the numbers that are, it's a bit like vowels and consonants in the alphabet. They've got just 2 different vibrational frequencies. There's a trinity of numbers, or the other rest of the numbers.
Yeah.
The other rest of the numbers, if they haven't got a name, maybe they do, they make this W. They make this wave of intelligence, of arithmetic. And this W is used in a plethora of different logos. And in sense, if we 3D the qualities of these energies, it makes a toroidal field as well. You use it in your logo, and you don't you, Simon? And so they use it in like because it makes a vesica Pisces. It's the two circles coming together, and everything's born through a vesica Pisces. I know I was. So this is our salvation because we come from these shapes. This geometry is our nature. Maths is our nature. It's not something that was man-made that we came up with and constructed ourselves. It's something that we observed and learnt through, in a sense, and were born through. Anyway, so going back to the nature of this W, which we see in so many logos, and you can talk about it for hours, but I don't want to linger on it too long because there's more information. But we see that this W is also this sign here. This is the 1. This is the 2. This is the 4. This is the 8. This is the 7. This is the 5. And then it goes bouncing around up back to the 1. And so we see that these guys, and again, are using these hand signals, these mudras, which represent maps. So put all those cool numbers aside. This isn't a bad thing. This is okay. They're just celebrating Saturn.
Yeah.
So this is like the devil horns, and they're celebrating Saturn. They're like, which isn't a bad thing. It's the knowledge of Saturn, how to create a business and make it last, how to create a foundation to make it last, how power structures maybe do hoard certain information, and they're celebrating that, it could be said. But this isn't about darkness. This is about illumination.
Right.
This is we've currently got Mercury in Scorpio. We've got Venus retrograde in Scorpio. We've got Jupiter bringing expansion and awareness to all that which has been hidden in Scorpio. So this is the time that we bring awareness to what has been obscured from our vision. And that's what occult information is. It's nothing scary, can be taboo, but it's really about bringing awareness to all that has been hidden. Even in a game of snooker or bowls, if you can't see the ball that you're going for, rather than say you're snookered, you can say that you're occult, simply because you can't see it.
Exactly.
The kitchen is occult to me right now. I can't see it.
Brilliant.
Right,
I love that. So cool.
Yes, indeed. It's incredibly exciting. So we can look at the numbers also as elements, in a sense, when we're talking about this pattern, because we see that there was a triangle, and the triangle of this is the triangle of the Illuminati, you could say. Again, more sign signals, and we put 9 at the top, and the bottom 2 corners of the triangle would be the numbers 3 and 6. And if you do things with 3 and 6, if you do maths with 3 and 6, then they just bounce between each other, and they never get to the 9. Whether it's a division or multiplication, they just work together on a higher vibration than the numbers that are doing this pattern, but they work together to make another field of energy. However, I heard in one of these YouTube chats that I was doing a video, which is very interesting, somebody said, everything in the universe has order, even the division of 9. So 9 always divides into itself. If you try and break down 9, it will just always come back to itself, and you'll be able to come back to 9. So that's the numbers, which are incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
So what does this all have to do with astrology, apart from the significations of Saturn and how these are used in corporations, which you can see through astrological charts over the course of time, which is Saturn. So basically, we're looking at this realm. If you say that we're within this cycle, this space of Saturn, this expanded space, this is time. We're in Saturn's time wave. The time wave of polarity, whether it's light or dark, it's the sine wave that we're within. And to have a perspective within the sine wave, you must manifest a physical body, because to come into time, you need physicality. Without a physical body, we would just be essence of our very being. And yeah, that's a very beautiful thing, but we came here to experience and to self-experience and to grow and to expand through our awareness of our experience of selves and one another.
Right.
And to do that, you need a point of perspective and you need a point of reference. And you can't have a point of reference without the letter A. And what is the letter A? Well, it's our very avatar being. It's your flesh suit. It's the thing that we carry our bones and our organs around that allow us to manifest within so we can experience. And
Yes.
that's what being depicted by Da Vinci with his picture of us standing in the shape of A. And that is what is depicted within the letter A. So how this relates to astrology is that all symbols, astrology is the recognition of all shapes, signs, and symbols. It's not just about being able to diagnose a birth chart and
Yeah.
to understand our conception through time. Astrology is actually the logos, I see. Astrology is the astro-logos. And the logos is the building brick, like a Lego brick, which you can build anything from because it's the micro and the macro.
Right on.
And so that sounds a bit crazy, but really, when we dive into it, it's actually a point of awareness, which is our creator point. We could say, like in a mouse on a screen on a computer, the point of the mouse is what we use to click on things.
Correct.
It's what sometimes we double click, whatever. It's what we want to bring to our attention. It's pointing there. Just like the point of the star. We started talking about the sun, which is our local star, but not local, more local than our very selves, because we're stars. This is the real empowerment of the astrology and the depth of this convoluted, crazy conversation. Crazy yet practical. Because it really comes down to seeing that, yes, we are Adam, the beat of our heart, a dum, our drum. We are this singularity, and we are Eve. We are the even. We are evened out by our relationship with other people. We are both the individual and the whole. We are the micro and the macro. We are the alpha, the first, and the omega. So we are infinite, and we are here for a short amount of time as well. We are both.
Right.
Because we're infinitely resurrecting, just like the sun, on a loop of consciousness every day, every year, And so that's really wasn't just an exciting revelation. That's why it's called a revelation, because it's a revolution. It's a revolution of time going round and round infinitely in a circle, which gives us the ability to gain conscious awareness. That's what happens in a womb. That's what happens in cycles. We gain awareness of ourselves and what we can grow. Well, we can grow our awareness of self, but we can grow all kinds of things. We can create anything. And I remember when first coming into this spiritual kind of process, this spiritual path, they're like, you can create anything. I was like, that sounds like a great idea. I feel like I can create anything, but truly, can I? How? Well, it's because you can create anything with Saturn, with the timing of Saturn, with the dedication of a Saturnian path, with taking the path of the goat. But what does the goat do? Well, it just eats green pastures and ascends to the top of the hill, top of the mountain, because it will seek out grass until it's ran out of grass. And sometimes it might have to sustain itself in a little gully under a rock while it's rainy, blustery, there's rocks falling. It might have to stand there while there's crumbling rocks for a while. It could be quite depressing while it has to be so patient while it's finding the pathway to the next grass that it can eat to sustain itself. But the goat will not be stopped, because they say the goat is the greatest of all time in an acronym, as an acronym. And we'll get to acronyms in a bit. But the goat will ascend to the top of its mountain and find green pastures and have a picnic at the top. And there's no zip line to the top if you want to make your journey last. This is the Saturnian path. It's about laying brick after brick after brick, so that we have a strong foundation which will last. That's to support us. This comes with the accumulation of awareness, knowledge, or the building of a building, the building of a structure, the building of a business. And this is our business. This is what we are here to build. And so it's about also now not allowing big conglomerates to run our world, to run our business, and to take our power into our own structures and build our own businesses. This is our empowerment now. It's not about relying on so many structures outside of ourselves. It's about empowering ourselves to what we can build within our experience. It's not to say that we all have to be individual. We can still support other people and be in communities, but we see that there's been a bit of things out of balance, where there's been fewer and fewer diversity within the structures that support us. We've been having certain choices, Coke
Yeah.
or Pepsi. Neither of which are going to be great for
No.
us. They might be appealing or satisfying for a moment, but they're not going to be good for our bodies. They're pretty toxic. And so we can see that there's always these limited choices because there's been a power structure which has hoarded information about how to build successful things within this environment. And that's the Saturnian or Satan path. So nobody wanted to look at the ghoul of Satan. I got a tarot deck for the first time 2-3 years ago, and I did not want to look at them because the depiction of the Capricorn card is the depiction of Satan.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, having grown up with the dogmatic term of what that means, it was scary. And
Absolutely.
scary, again, is false evidence that can appear real. However, truly, once we get to learn that actually this is actually just the way that Saturn had been depicted, the feminine quality of dedication and self-nurturance has
Yeah.
been depicted in a ghoulish, demonic manner. Even the term demon is really ridiculously exhausted in the sense that the actual definition of demon is a spirit has taken on a physical density. And so in that sense, we're all demons because we're all Saturn.
Yeah.
We're all the feminine. We are all feminine spirits in a physical world. And even the physical world is an illusion because it's 0.999% nothingness, no thingness, which is the spirit.
No thingness. Love that.
And so we're really looking at seeing that our quality is we're living within the world of the Maya, we're living within the world of illusion, but we're making use out of the physical illusion because this is how we get to create our very inspiration. And our inspiration is what we find in our heart. It is that solar quality of love. And that's what we have in abundance.
All right.
I need a break just to ground myself, but there's so much more I would like to express with regards to the language of numbers and the alphabet. But I'll
Sure.
pass to you for a moment.
Sure. That's not a problem. There's a lot of information that just streaming through you right now, and just like watching the chat at the same time, and there's I'm really happy that people are. I mean, what I'm wanting to the perception of this hosting of this conversation is, like I mentioned earlier, it's a great way to hear what you're processing, but it's also great to be able to help those that are awakening to astrology see beyond what it is about, and that there is this really, really like occult, deep, esoteric nature about us that that exists here. And part of awakening to using astrology or any form of sort of knowledge that is wanting to awaken yourself deeper is knowing that part of it is using a system, and part of it is acknowledging the nature of existence itself, which is to me what this conversation is about, that you're bringing through, is really through your own language and your unique way, encouraging us to see that there are multiple layers to this realm. And especially right now, as humanity will be consistently keep on going through emotional shocks that will awaken them. It's not like this Pluto through Capricorn energy is going to just go, okay, well, now I've done what I've needed to do, and the world is crazy at this stage, but eventually it's going to go away. It's not. It's just going to get more and more illuminated. And part of the rise of a lot of people and their interest in trying to explore what is occurring, what is happening, are bumping into astrology and numerology and human design and gene keys and various other forms of ways in which we can interpret reality to get to the essence of what this is actually about for us, which comes back down to the point of spirit into matter and the awakening of that spirit through the matter. The matter is the feminine just holding the space for the illumination of awareness to take place. And it's really, really silly, but I encourage you to watch a film called Ready Player One. And for somebody like myself that's born in the 80s and making a correlation to that time, because this is what this film is about, it's just a kind of collection of nostalgic memories put together in a futuristic setting by Steven Spielberg. And the reason why I liked it is because there's these three these three challenges that have to be accomplished, and each challenge has a very, very deep mystery in it, coded in within the human nature of life. And I loved it because it was philosophical in some way. And the first one was they had to basically complete this task, and nobody was able to complete it because the way that you were thinking about it was always is literally how humanity has been approaching everything up until now, which is very much about, you know, Western medicine. We attack it from the outside in, and we probe it. We take needles, and we instead of like healing disease within inside of us, we're attacking it from the outside in. This is this masculine approach of dominance, and you know, Chiron through Aries, we're going to heal this collective trauma around our essential war, right? And that's where the materialization of this esoteric knowledge has become suppressed, because any person that has that has occult knowledge can then overthrow people because they can see them for who they are, right? The people that have occult knowledge that are keeping it repressed from other people are in power because they know that once it is exposed, then everybody has this power and everybody will awaken to their power. So the thing with the Ready Player One is that in order to, and it's a spoiler alert, so if you haven't watched the film, like just pause it for a second or move it ahead if you're watching this video afterwards. But spoiler alert, the way that they fix the first one is they go backwards. And when they go backwards, the code that fixes, that like solves this logical sequence actually activates, and they complete this thing. And what I came to understand really, really deeply was that when the universe expands outwardly and we expand into going exploring ourselves, we go outward. But at some point there's a turn where we go backwards, and true awakening experience is not going outwards, but it's actually about returning back to the center. And what we're doing this time around is that we've already explored outwardly. So when we turn around and we go backwards, we're actually going back into ourselves, as in going back to the source. And as we take our awareness and we observe what we've journeyed, we see the story. In other words, going backwards is actually the way forward. Healing, going backwards is how we heal ourselves. And it doesn't mean physically going backwards in life, it means going inward and observing the feminine and its journey, its cycle, right? That's why you would use astrology and go backwards to see transits to resolve some things. Unfinished business, the Saturn realm, you know? It's a very big thing to see and to hear when you really look at it from that point of view and go, oh, okay, I came onto the earth, so I'm here, masculine energy, but now I'm going to go backwards to understand the complexes that I carry with me to resolve them so I can go forward. So going forward is about going backwards.
And when we talk about going backwards, this is so funny actually. It's so actually because the goats, again, they sometimes have to go back down the hill because they've left something vital, whether it's a bit of their fur or whatever have you, maybe their partner, something like that. They have to go back down the hill, whether it's for more grass or whatever have you. Maybe it's just because the route that they thought it comes to a dead end, but you have to retrace your steps back down to really discover. But we've always taught that going back on ourselves isn't a good thing again.
Exactly.
In a sense, the definition of going back on yourself is perverse. And that's not a quality which we're told is good.
Also, but why? Like, why is that the case? And that's when you can see why that occult knowledge would be repressed. And yes, why this is so beautiful. That's what I mean about the conversation, is that you bringing this to light is the very unrepressing of this knowledge to the collective. So that one person that's watching this video goes, wow, I learned so much from Philip today. Even if it was just this one thing that he said, you know, that's the point. That's the point of hosting this and really just sharing the space here with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's not the easiest. I would actually like to bring it together in a concise course, but it's almost like it's best explored when knowledge is in a format like this. At first, we're still trying to divulge it. However, like, it's so incredibly exciting. It really truly is. So I was thinking what you said about going back in time for a moment, first of all, because this is what is best. Astrology is best used for in a consultation therapy basis. This is how we do our healing. It's a tool for understanding and perceiving ourselves once we've already been through a certain situation, and it's the most useful tool for gaining acceptance and clarification and forgiveness, yes, and understanding, compassion for our experience. And so I actually see that we are manifested into time right here, and when we're not in time, we're timeless, in the sense that we could say that we come back from the future to experience ourselves here in the physical,
Thank
which
you.
is the real truth I see that we're coming from. We are our ancestors from the future come back to heal ourselves here in the matter of now. That's it. That's what I see, and it's just like Terminator, the movie. This is he came back in a technology suit. This is our technology suit. This is our avatar. This is our flesh being. This is what maybe we, I don't know. It's a bit convoluted or crazy, or maybe it's not, to say that we constructed these suits ourselves as extraterrestrial spiritual beings from the future or from out of time, from within, and we came here into this denser, lower, slower vibrational experience so that we can maybe work on ourselves from the inside out, from the this more solid way of being, so that we can have an effective change on what we are in the future. Because you can't actually create when you haven't got a physical being. You haven't got any influence when you're not here in the physical. You need to be a star to have influence, because stars light the way. And so you need to be in an avatar suit. You need to come here into the flesh to be able to create. And this is why, like, in Jesus, in a sense, was such a profound figure, because he was God in the flesh, spirit in the flesh, just like each one of us are. We could say that we're Lucifer in the flesh, or Christ in the flesh. The words are really alternative. You can change which one to use. They're all pretty much the same. They just have been a bit muddied, which is a shame. But however, we can bring this to light, and that's bringing it to our awareness. And that's what Lucifer is. It's the light bearer. It's the light bringer. Mm-hmm. So really, what we came here to do is what I've come here to do today is to share that actually astrology is the study of angles. We knew that, right? The square is 90 degrees. In fact, all of the good angles add up to 9. 180 degrees is our relationship to another thing. That's 1 plus 8, 9. If we do a quincunx, that's 270 degrees. No, sorry, sorry, 3 angles. Closing square would be 270 degrees. So that's 3 right angles. 360 degrees. Again, that's another 9. And so basically you can do this again and again and again. And the numbers will add up to 9. Because 9 is a harmonic ratio of creativity. It's almost like the Godhead in a sense. It's the ultimate number. And when we conceive of ourselves as stars, we see that we are the number 9 as well. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. I've got to focus on this letter A.
Yeah.
Letter A is built out of 3 lines. 3 lines, 3 beams. Beam? What's a beam? Well, a beam comes out of the sun. It's a beam of light. And we're talking about astrology being the language of light, the language of angles. Angles. Angel language. So basically, we're talking about how English, Anglish, or Anglo-Saxon, which was originally English was derived from, is basically a huge part of astrology. It's not just to say the English version, but I'm talking about the characters, the alphabet, the way that these shapes are drawn, and how we can measure what the meaning of these shapes are through the same means that we operate with astrology, through the angles, like a right angle, 90 degrees, or any shape or sign. Because astrology is the shapes, the study of symbols. And so let's take that A again and see that you create an A with 1, 2, let's put a third one in there. Oh my God, there's an A. There's 3 beams, 3 lines. And to create within the 3rd dimension, you need 3 beams or 3 planes. The physical 3rd dimensional plane. You need a point A, point of reference. And so if we're star beings, of course we've got 5 points, but we need 3 beams to be manifested within here. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to prop ourselves up. You can't live in a flat tent. You need 3 poles to stick it up. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to have any shape or form. We would just be 2-dimensional beings or something like that. Maybe we'd work on a piece of paper, but we wouldn't really be able to give ourselves the flesh suit to be able to live within and create from. So this language has got many answers from it. I mean, if we just look at the A as a point of reference, and it's, as I say, the Da Vinci, and it's the first letter of the alphabet. So it's very poignant that it's the singularity, just like each one of us are the singularity within the whole. Well, what's a star? Well, we're taught in science that a star is a singular point of reference, it's a singular speck of light in the sky. But we're also told that all stars eventually turn into black holes. WHOLE. Nassim Haramein was somebody which I watched many years ago. He did an 8-hour Google explanation about his awareness and how he come to it, and used lots of geometry. So much of it went over my head, and it was a long time ago, and I didn't think that I'd ever be able. I mean, I kind of grasped what he meant, but I didn't really be able to see that how I could make practical use of that information. But it was a tremendous presentation of great depth and awareness. So a star turns into a black hole. It goes boom, and then suddenly you can't see it. In fact, they also say that all of the stars that we see in the night sky have already gone boom. It's just because the light takes so long to reach our eye that we see them as still being stars. And so a black hole would mean that it's the whole, the entire blackness of the night sky. A star is the singularity and the whole. It is the alpha and the omega. It is the entirety and the individual. And so we can see that that's a polarity that has already gone on when you get rid of the illusion of time. And so I'm seeing that there's a likeness between the number 9 and the star. The number 9 is the circle again. It's a 6 upside down. So it's the tail of the circle is a bit like the story that's leeching, not leeching, sorry, that's going beyond the womb. It's like we are the circle in our wholeness, but we're going beyond ourselves, manifested here in time, seeking more to our tail, our story. And so really we're lost in time. We're lost in love. We're lost in the physical. We're lost in space. That's all the same thing as far as I'm concerned. And when we realize ourselves, when we realize our spiritual nature, that's the conception, the idea, the realization of self. You could say it's the immaculate conception, because we're threading our tail, our thread of consciousness, the string of our awareness through the eye of a needle, through that circle of the number 9. That's a bit deep, but I think it's an analogy which works because it's a visual one which we can all grasp, I intend. And that thread of consciousness goes through everything. It goes through every shape, every form. And so we start with just a line. Let's just start with a line. This is a string, and we create the letter I. I, me, the individual, the insane one. I was going to go there, if you will. But like, it's about, it's the same as I, but it's just I. Because it's our inspiration, it's our I, it's our awareness. And what is inspiration? It's what we get when we go within. It's that heart. It's all that thing, all those things that we find in our heart. It's our joy. It's our spirit. It's our drum. It's the beat. And so our I is our vision. It's our awareness. It's what we put our attention onto. It's what gives us light. And we reflect through. If we look at the dynamics of an eye, it's actually very reflective, and it goes about. If we look at this, what we're actually taught in school, if you will, it bounces all around like a hall of mirrors inside the very construction that is an eye, the eye ball, and so it's very reflective in itself. Anyway, so we see that there's a lot of celebrations with regards to the eye of Horus, and in the Egyptian times, and all of this, the eye in the sky, even in modern culture, or they even do it in the Illuminati style circles. It's all about the eye of awareness, all of this stuff, the hidden eye, or whatever have you, all-seeing eye. But this is again about our empowerment, because I see the eye is just one line. It takes 3 eyes to create an A. And we've all got three eyes. Our third eye is that singular eye of our awareness. It's that spirit, you know, it's that intuitive eye. It's the eye that you are.
Right on.
And so all of this language can become a bit more like a crazy trick, really, because it's like seeing the synchronicities between the letters, which really are spirits in themselves. Not just spirits and letters, but everything that you create with a pen, because a pen is a point of awareness, just like a mouse, just like our attention. Whatever
Yeah.
we put our attention on is what we create. So we can draw any shape, and that's our awareness. We're drawing signs and sigils that mean things, and so these letters mean things that we're creating from.
Correct. Like exactly how you described it. The point of the pen, right, is creating. So letters come from the point of the pen, and that materializes something. Right? Contract. When you write a contract or when you sign a contract, it's like your attention is being bounded to this agreement.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and I love it. So we look at like the signification of a pen. It's a very occult kind of thing, to be honest. It's a stationary tool, and the pens are quite new in a sense. We started with our pencils and with our quails, which are feathers with a bit of ink. But these are the tools that we'd use to use with our language, to use our numbers. This is like going back to Pythagoras, and he would use a compass and a pencil to create his shapes, to do his circles. Let's go back to the moon, creating the cycles. And if you was to create a flower of life, oh gosh, I haven't prepared this, but it's right here. The flower of life is one I made earlier, or maybe a few years ago. It's a bit messy, but this started out as one circle, and you could say it's one cycle of the moon. You put one next to another one, and then you've got what you have used for your logo, and it's a Vesica Pisces. It's a toroidal field. We are actually within that.
That's right.
This is our auric field. This is our aura. And then if you create more and more, this is your new logo. So it's got the third one to it. And it goes round and round, and you get the seed of life. And this is the germination process. In the sense, this is the gestation cycle of the womb. And as I said, it takes there's 360 circles that are added to a Saturnian cycle. So I'm seeing that 360 circles create what would be us. However, the funny thing is, after that would be 9 months that creates that, or 28 years in a slower process. But the funny thing is, after 3 months, we stop being geometry and we start being a little flesh bag. We start being a baby. And so that's really when our germination takes form in that Gemini energy. Gemini germination, perspective gaining. We stop being this this load of circles because we've been through 3 months of germination within a womb that allows us to take a form at that point, and that's within our mothers, and so that's very important and poignant. Anyway,
Absolutely.
so this is a very chironic process that we're doing here, because we, again, to go back to the Terminator analogy, or the truth, if you could say, that we are here manifested from the timeless in time. And it's almost like where we had awareness and where we didn't, the dark and the light. And the healing energy is to deal with stuff where we have wounding, where we're not able to put our attention on it too frequently because it's too much, too painful, too obscure, too horrendous for us to deal with all the time. However, we carry it with us, and it can be greatly beneficial because it's our experience. And so within our experience, we've had discomfort, which we're able to help ourselves through other situations which may feel less than pleasurable or pleasing, as well as help other people through our experience, that kind of wisdom that comes with Chiron. And we come back to the thread and the needle, and through being present in the space of discomfort, threading into the wound with our needle and thread, and being able to, because when we put our awareness on our darkness, we see that it doesn't have any power over us anymore. And by being present with it, we're feeling the discomfort, we're having a healing process. Don't want to spend too long there. Let's go back out and let's have a dance, let's have a boogie, let's go to the beach, let's go ice skating, whatever it may be. let's go back to our safety, and we take our needle and thread back out into the light, into where we feel okay and accustomed to. And then we go back into this discomfort. Maybe this is a once a week process. Maybe
Yeah.
this is a once a month process. Whatever feels right for us. And over the course of time, by doing this weave with our conscious thread of awareness, we're actually stitching up what was a gaping wound, and we're seeing that this is our scar now, and it's our war wound, a badge of honor, which we've learnt through and can really use with a great amount of pride to say, yeah, we've been through that, I've learnt through that, and now I'm able to see it as a gift through my experience.
Wow.
And that's what we're here within our entire lives, raising our own consciousness as a spiritual being, as a collection of spiritual beings, as human beings.
I love it. I love the needle and the thread. I think people in the chat were also like, that was super cool. I liked how you brought that together in a way that, like, the practicalness of it is for a lot of people that are waking up to their own personal story and what it means to be human at a beyond the Saturnian realm. So acknowledging that the soul story is existing for them and that they carry these triggers and these wounds and these sensitivities, and that the way to approach healing right in the beginning is to recognize it's a loop effect of giving it some attention and then going back out into dealing with the day-to-day existence and coming back to it and slowly but surely tending to it like a nurse would tend to a wound of a soldier, for instance. How much do you have to share more? The reason why I'm saying that is because we've come up to the hour or a little bit more. So
I feel like maybe not too much more, but maybe a little bit more, maybe another 20 minutes or half hour, if that's okay. Just a few more bits. Maybe we
I've probably got about 15 minutes left myself.
Okay, well, let's just wrap it all in. So basically, firstly, we're going to just go with the tarot because it's right here in front of me. We see that we're talking about cycles and loops. The Fool here is it's about the whole journey. It's the zero in the tarot. And so you could say that this is the journey of the spirit. In fact, it's the journey of ourselves. It's the journey of Jesus. It's the journey of the Christ. Well, you could say that is the entire journey. It's the loop. It's the inspiration. It's happy-go-lucky. And you see that in this journey. It's even got the sun there, which represents the spirit.
Yeah.
But here's this ghoulish nature of Saturn, which we've become familiar with. And so maybe we'd want to... Can we modernize these concepts? Can we bring out new evolutionary astrology that can understand that actually we're not beasts in the sense that, yes, we're physically bound, but that's a gift. And we're not to feel ostracized by our flesh nature. It's okay to be attracted sexually to another being. It's okay to want to experience a cake, which may be not necessarily good for us, as long as we learn to balance these things out by taking the opportunity to not be diving into these things all day, every day, but like learning that everything's got a polarity, everything's got a balance. And so here again, this is to show that it's not just about Capricorn that's been bastardized, for want of a better term, because this is the Hermit, and this is Kronos again, showing up as a masculine figure, but it's a Virgonian card, a goddess card, Mother Earth, Demetra, and represented by an old man here. Nothing wrong with old men. They're beautiful creatures. I'll be one myself one day. But we've got these feminine qualities within us, which is really what this archetype's about. It's about going within and finding the illumination of spirit within our heart. That's the Virgo quality.
Amazing.
And so we're all stars here. We're all, and so this is about the conception that actually we are. How many times does the sun have to revolve above our heads? How many times do we have to put the Christmas tree lights up around and round the tree and stringing these sparse lights up to realize that actually when we put the star on top of the tree at the end of the ceremony, that actually we are the star that we're here to celebrate the most. It's not this outside celebration. We are each stars. And when we come into this Aquarius age, we see that actually we're a community of stars. We are a constellation of stars. We are a stellar event waiting to happen. And the future is now in regards to that, because we are all the sun. We've all got Leo energy. We've all got a fifth house. And so it's about being able to celebrate that and know that we are infinitely resurrecting this energy. with great strength and creativity, because this has got a figure of 8 behind this sign here, this
Yeah.
quality. And the 8 is about infinity. It's about infinite resurrection. It's about the loop that goes on and on forever,
Yeah.
in highs and lows, in dark and light. And so it's very often that we see that actually stars are represented by magic. And so the Venetian star is about the beauty of the Fibonacci. We see that it actually creates the pentagram, and that's the 5-pointed star. And if you break down all the different lines in a pentagram, then it comes down to a Fibonacci breakdown of fine beauty. And these are actually the different breakdowns within our own body. And it's the blueprint of our very being that's being created by the Venus in the sky. And we see that this is also happening on a much bigger level with our relationships now, with Venus retrograde. And so we're seeing that actually we're creating magic, harmony, and healing within this experience through our turmoil, through our bliss, through our experiences. And that's magic, because only stars can create magic, and we're all magicians. And this is the beautiful thing.
The magician.
And so really that's grounding this through basically where we haven't had our attention. We're being reborn through a process of the death of the old conception of what we are here to bring, what we have here to offer ourselves, and what we can bring around a balancing of our conscious awareness, so that we can be compassionate with our souls, with ourselves, and with one another, in a way which is illuminating and caring and compassionate for our entire experience that we share here together. And that's pretty much how we can all help. This is my final point. So basically, knowledge is taught like that thread. It's tight.
Yes.
It's not loose. There's no loophole. Well, there's probably loads of loopholes, because we're threading the eye through our needles. We're conceiving of our very selves, which is a right old palaver. However, when we're seeing that knowledge is something which is sturdy, and you can learn it, and it's reliable, and that's what astrology is. It's the conception of signs and sigils, language and shapes. It's the study of angles. It's the study of angels. And every angle is an angel, because every angle is a point of reference between one space and another, between one star and another. That's what astrology is. It's the study of angels, the study of angles, the study of light. It's light language, it's love language, it's the language of God. It's the astrologos.
Amazing.
And that's the way I see it. And I just see astrology through such more of a beautiful lens and perspective. And it was already my favorite thing. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, it truly is magnificent. And it is one more thing. It is the world. It is the word. And it is the world. It's the study of the world. It's the study of the spin of the planets whirling around in the sky that creates the world, that creates love, because you are love, and so each of us shall be.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I really appreciate your sharing, and just your desire to want to contribute in your own way to how you're processing this deep sort of knowledge that exists behind the scenes, and what a way to have the conversation when Mercury, like you said, was in Scorpio, and Venus is in Scorpio, and Jupiter's there, and the trine between Jupiter and Neptune, and Venus and Neptune as well, and in Pisces, bringing to the surface this information for people to digest. So how do people know where you are in the existence of this internet? Like what's your website, and do you have a Facebook place, or how can people contact you?
My website's under continued evolution. I look at yours and I actually think, wow, what a masterpiece your website is, and I'm moving towards cultivating that kind of presentation. I think it's really good what you've done with your site. However, my one is unifyingperspectives.com, and I'm starting to upload articles there. I'm going to get consistent with that. I've got over 500 videos available on my YouTube channel, which you can access through my website, Unifying Perspectives. You can contact me for a consultation, whether it's a therapy space that you'd wish, or a teaching space. I like to be able to do both and empower people to the fact that we are here to be astrologers, because it's the language of stars. And so we can all learn a little bit, and we can all follow our transits and be empowered by this great knowledge and wisdom, which is astrology is both knowledge and wisdom. It's a self-experiential tool of clarification and perspective. And this is how we, yeah, so this is how it gets taught, because that taught tight piece of string, but it's also how we sharpen the point of our own stars. And we must wrap our own thread of consciousness around ourselves to become noticed. This is why people who are illuminated write songs. This is why they wear jumpers with logos on it. It's so we can become influential and beam our light to shine the way. You know, people who were trying to get their goods to shore across the oceans in their ships,
Yeah.
they use the stars to illuminate the way. And so we're each illuminating the way for one another, because we're all teachers and we're all here to help one another on this journey through our expansion of our own awareness.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot, and I hope that everybody got something huge out of today. And I think next time we're going to talk, I think we're going to meet on your channel and talk a little bit about human design, if I'm not mistaken. So,
yes, I'm so excited to have you. My channel's Philip Daniel Miles. It's just my name on YouTube. I've had Simon as a guest a couple of times before. We had some great conversations already, but I'm so excited for you to teach me about human design, because I've had a little bit of look of it, but it's quite new to me, and I know that it's very profound and very practical and useful and deep, and I'm very excited to hear your analysis and how it all works.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks very much for everybody's attention. Thanks very much for your time, dude. It was super, super, super amazing. And until then, have a wonderful day, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.